independence. Why? Why should that be the case? Tom?
Yeah, I was going to ask a few weeks looking at the question of corporate governance, and you mentioned women on boards, and there's a lot of positive evidence in the marketplace that suggests that mixed boards get much better outcomes than non-mixed boards, and that in fact the Lehman shock would have never happened if the board had at least one woman on the Lehman board at the time.
On the which?
The Lehman board.
Oh, the Lehman board.
Yeah, Lehman Brothers.
Now, the problem I have with this is not that that's a problem in having equal women on boards or more women on boards, but that there's certain questions come to mind then. Do women have a morally superior? Are they morally superior? Is that what's being said?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that the quantitative evidence, certainly in Australia and other countries, is that mixed boards make for better decisions.
I'm sure a case can be mounted for that, and I'm not denying that. Though I would also say it's interesting that you'd hope that equality is a good in and of itself, rather than just, well, they make better decisions. I mean, even if they didn't make better decisions, or if they make worse decisions, would it still be right to have equal women on the board? Well, I think it would be. But would that, I mean, if the evidence said differently, that would just it just kind of shows the sort of principles at work, which is interesting. Yes, Robin?
Just curious, following on that, what was the basis of the conclusion that it would have been a very different result for Lehman if there'd been one woman on the board?
There's been a book.
It depends which woman, of course.
Sure. No. I mean,
there's been a book written.
Let's look into the doctrine of infallibility. But yeah, there has been one major book in the United States written. It was quite serious. It was quite a serious study.
Right. We're going to add Mark. Yeah.
Two questions. I'd like to know, the last time I saw this declaration was actually on a wall in a prison in Vietnam. It's interesting. But the background to that statement, was it just Thomas Jefferson thinking it was a good idea, or was it a committee that came up with the idea?
Well, I'm assuming, I don't know I'm not really up on the history of the creation of the Declaration of Independence, although of course it emerges from a number of Enlightenment thinkers like Thomas Paine, John Locke and others, and Benjamin Franklin, a number of different philosophers, thinkers and politicians that would have been working, that fed into Thomas Jefferson. So I don't think he just plucked it from the air, and it's part of the air that was being breathed in the 18th century in terms of its commitment to rational thought. It would be interesting to know if it was influenced by Immanuel Kant and the categorical imperative, who's the great German philosopher, but he's about the same time, so I'm not sure. But I think there's a great evidence, you know, as with much of Jefferson's stuff, there's a sort of course, a Christian heritage to what he's saying. He's just shorn it of Christian dogma. So he's kind of taken out the bits of Christianity he doesn't like and moved on. James?
I haven't thought about it enough, but isn't this a problem that secularists face about anything to do with absolute truth? And then is it the response, typically nowadays, around, well, absolute truth for us is what the majority says in a democracy, right? And so at the moment, the majority say this, so that's the absolute truth. But 50 years' time, that might change, and we're comfortable with that absolute truth now changing.
Well, that's interesting, because so the point that James is making is about the sort of absolute truth idea. We're at a really strange period of history when it comes to the idea of absolute. Is there an absolute truth or not? Because the scientific community has reacted very strongly against postmodernity and wants to say, you guys are having a laugh, aren't you? You know, we present data and we do stuff. Right, so take your French philosophy and you can stick it. You know, you're having a joke, and the postmodern philosophers probably were having a joke. I mean, it is kind of humorous. But 20 years ago, when I was at university and postmodernism was reigning and there was no absolute truth and you couldn't make absolute truth claims, things felt very different. So I think we've kind of moved away from that, and so there is a kind of tension here. But at the same time, these ideas like these great ideas with such great rhetorical force, like human rights, equality, liberty, they have enormous persuasive power because they attach to great narratives, but they can be made to mean whatever you want. That's partly what that sort of no absolute truth thing means, because we don't want to appeal to any kind of absolutism, but then we do want to appeal to something grounded like human rights, and they must come from somewhere. But then, in the end, is it just a matter of the majority? It was interesting in the same-sex marriage debate, which made appeal both to equality and liberty, but they were kind of contradictory appeals, but just different points of the argument. There were appeals made to human rights, but there's no court in the world, no Commission of Human Rights has ever said that there is a right for same-sex couples to marry. I'm not asking you to agree with me on that. I'm just saying there was no human right, there was no court that ever said there was. So to what were people appealing when they said it's a human right for you to marry the partner of the partner of the gender of your choosing? Who were they appealing to? What could they ground? And I think this was an interesting case in where human rights were appealed to, a kind of metaphysical idea, but they weren't. They were just kind of floating out. It was sort of just made up because it has enormous rhetorical appeal. There was no court you could appeal to if you wanted to find a grounding for it. I'm sorry, I've taken a number of different avenues in answering your question. Yes.
So, Michael, you referred to equality. You referred to the American Declaration of Independence and also the French Revolution.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on Australia having a Bill of Rights, and whether we need a revolution to achieve that?
Well, we might come to that towards the end. Does Australia need a Bill of Rights? I was always suspicious of a Bill of Rights because Australia, like England, has sort of muddled along convention and goodwill. And whenever a Bill of Rights comes forward, you wonder what's being smuggled in it. Is this going to mean rule by the courts rather than rule by the Parliament? And are we going to turn into Canada? Which would be a disaster, where the court just makes decisions that then the people have to kind of agree with, because there's sort of no parliamentary comeback for that. Canada is such a terrible country, obviously. I'm being sarcastic. And so Australians have always been suspicious of that, and we actually had a referendum which included a comment about freedom of religion about 20 years ago, wasn't it? Maybe it was back in the 80s. And Australia, you think, who could vote against freedom of religion? But we did, because we were worried about putting more in our constitution, because we thought that the more we put in our constitution, the more courts then have a chance to divide us. So there was that. But I wonder if the time has come for there to be a better discussion about something like a Bill of Rights. I hope we don't get a revolution to. So that's not the Australian way at all. We don't. We live too far apart.
Well, if we didn't have one in 72, we're not going to have one in 75.
Yeah.
We're not going to have one.
I think that's right. We'd be suspicious that then lawyers would govern us, and that's what I'd be worried about. Yes, sir.
Michael, what do you think of equality in politics, like in particular Australian politics, but also, with American politics, guys like Billy Graham, is very popular, but more in the present era. And Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Equal vote, equal voice."
Yeah. Well, I think the civil rights movement, picking up on the American Civil War, of course, that narrative has been a very culturally, it was obviously politically and socially and legally persuasive, but it's been very culturally persuasive as well. So because of the sort of the popularity of African American cultural, that cultural influence, which is global and is certainly has had a huge impact here in Australia in Britain and Europe. And that narrative, that story, being so persuasive and repeated so often in movies and in music and in everything, then becomes something that if you want to get a cause going, you attach to it. So, now interestingly, of course, Martin Luther King is one of the most theological of political thinkers. Can't open his mouth without quoting the Bible. So that's no mistake. And in fact, I mean, we need to read sermons again because they are such a tremendous illustration of what I'm trying to prove here. That actually there's a Christian foundation to the kind of thing we value deeply. So now,
Michael,
yes,
in an attempt to sort of redress or resolve part of this issue, I reflect now in hindsight, in a past life, when I ran an association of state government authorities. And we were there about best practice and that sort of thing, exchanging information. But we were very careful, and it's a semantic issue, not to talk about uniformity across the nation, but harmonising issues, which was a way of saying we recognise differences of environment, differences of culture, etc., and whilst facilitating seamless relationships, and in fact fostering seamless relationships, which wouldn't be fostered if you didn't recognise the differences. Now, in a sense, in that, to me, there is a kernel or a germ of what you might mean by equality.
I think you're very much right. Harmony is a great word that I think I would prefer to equality at one level, because harmony does not prefer one and the other is in support, but actually the two going together mutually qualify and enrich. And I think it's a better metaphor. It's a better word to use, isn't it? It also recognises individuality in a way which is striking. So as a concept, it kind of really enriches the idea, the notion of equality, without kind of being a blanket